Hello, I'm Dawn Durham, and welcome to PaTTANpod. Maurice Belote was the keynote speaker for the HELIX Conference, High Expectations for Students with Low Incidence Disabilities. Maurice's work in the field of deafblindness for over 30 years has been dedicated to ensuring students leave school fully prepared to have the wonderful life they wish for themselves. Thanks, Maurice, for being on PaTTANpod today.
My pleasure.
I want to talk a little bit, and this was really the crux of your keynote here at the HELIX Conference, but I want to talk a little bit about happiness in the classroom. Why should I worry about my students' happiness in the classroom environment? Why is that important?
I think it's important because it's at the core of what we want for children. I'm a technical assistance provider, and so I go into schools, and one of my jobs is to change behavior. And I have tried many ways throughout my career, and I've been a technical assistance provider now for 28 years, going into schools and trying to get people to listen to new ways of doing things that they're pretty used to doing in a certain way. So I can explain why I'm asking them to do something by talking about how it will benefit the student. The student will be more actively engaged. The student will have access to the general ed curriculum. I can use terms like that. We've learned a lot from implementation science on how to do technical assistance, and I've even looked at the world of sales. I think as educators, we can learn from people who are good at selling, because they have techniques. And as a teacher, one of the reasons I'm a teacher is because I'm such a poor salesperson. But the longer I do this, the more I look at the strategies they use and think, okay, we've got something we can learn from them. But more and more I realize that if I just drill down to the most basic foundational issues that all people experience, that people understand that better than terms like active engagement or general access to the general ed curriculum, that they understand, oh, okay, happiness, I understand happiness, and I have to separate happiness and pleasure because those are two very different things. But if kids are actively engaged, if they have ways to communicate, if they're involved in extracurricular activities and have friends and have a reason to get up and go to school every day and want to go to school every day, they're going to enjoy their school experience much more, and the teachers will enjoy their experiences more. I go into a lot of programs where, I hate to say this, but everybody just looks kind of miserable. And I think they're miserable because they do the same thing every day. It's not very interesting. It's certainly not interesting for the students, but it doesn't even appear to be that interesting for the people who are involved in it, but it's comfortable. And so maybe thinking of new ways to reach people by talking about something that everybody can understand.
So it's a way of really connecting and making sure that we're using a terminology or a concept that we can all relate to, and therefore we can then kind of translate that into a classroom setting.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
So it's a way to reach the teachers and the practitioners in the field so that we're all talking on the same page.
Right. And engagement looks different throughout a child's ages in school. So for example, we know that by middle school and definitely by high school, students tell us that they tolerate the classes in order to get to what they really want, which is connections to friends, but also extracurricular activities. So whether that's sports, drama, theater, band, speech and debate, key club, whatever it is, that those are the activities in high school and in part middle school, that really drives the interest that kids have in school. They get through the classes every day to get to the part of school that means the most to them.
That pulls at them.
Right.
Yeah.
And those connections that students make, first of all, it's the easiest time in a person's life to make friends in high school. So beyond high school, it gets harder and harder to make deep, lasting friendships.
Okay.
As adults, we don't make as many deep, lasting friendships as we want, and that's particularly true for men. So those school years are really important for making the kinds of connections that lead to deep, lasting friendships, but also lead to your first job, your first boyfriend, girlfriend, romantic interest, your first living situation outside of the home where you grew up. All of those things that we get through connections, because we know somebody who knows somebody, and so that's what we're looking for in education, is thinking beyond the traditional IEP areas, which are fine, but the intent of IDEA was never to focus solely on academics. The special education program should be looking at many other so-called viable domains beyond academics.
So it's that when we think about happiness and why we need to care about that for our students, it's one so that we can relate to them, and we can categorize our practices in a way that we can all understand, but also understanding of from what our students are telling us, they'll tolerate the academics, but it's because they want to get to that end goal, which is these connections, these long-lasting friendships, the partnerships they may develop at that time in their life. So I think that's a key piece to understand.
And I may have spoken a little glibly. Tolerate. There are students who really, really enjoy their academic courses, and not so much everything else. It's a spectrum.
Sure.
But more students veer towards the other end of that spectrum.
And I think that's fair. That's fair to say.
Yeah.
I want to pivot for just a minute here when we think about this concept of the river and why it may be the most unrecognized cause of stress, particularly for our students who are deafblind. Can you help me walk me through that a little bit?
Yes. So the river is a new idea to me. So I'm just floating this, and no pun intended. I'm sorry I even said that. So there is an idea, a concept called cognitive closure.
Okay.
Or it's sometimes called the need for closure, or the need for cognitive closure. There are a lot of names for it. And it's that as humans, we don't tolerate ambiguity well. We want firm answers, and we want clear resolutions to everything. We don't handle the unresolved well. For instance, movies and TV shows. We prefer a clear ending where we know exactly what happens, where we're not left with thinking, did the person die? Did they live? Did the couple break up? Did they stay together? We
don't like cliffhangers.
We don't like cliffhangers. Yeah. It's why everybody hated the final episode of The Sopranos, which I have not seen yet.
I won't tell you, but okay.
Don't tell me. But in Western music, not Western like country Western, but Western like the Western world, when you listen to music, there is almost always a clear resolution to a piece of music. You'll have dissonant chord, dissonant chord, dissonant chord, and then consonants. You have like a resolution. You know that it's come to an end. What I think about many of the students that we serve in special education, especially children who are deafblind and may have significant multiple disabilities, is their educational careers lack cognitive closure. And I think of it like a river. And I when I started thinking about it, I thought of the song Old Man River. It just keeps on, whatever it does, moving along or flowing along. I don't remember the words. But it's this idea that the water just keeps flowing. These kids are in programs that don't have any natural stops that tell them something has been resolved. So if you're a child without disabilities in a general education program, you get assignments that are graded or projects that are graded. You get grades on your report cards. Those quarterly report cards become semester report cards. At the end of that year, you move up a grade, and in some cases, you'll graduate or step up from that school and move up to a different kind of school. There are all sorts of ways that typically developed gen ed students have to experience
that
resolve,
cognitive closure.
that cognitive closure. And we know, speaking just about children who are deafblind, we know that children who are deafblind live in a world that is extraordinarily stressful to them or for them, that they experience at sometimes toxic stress. And that's just from their lack of access to visual and auditory information. So who just touched me? Who are you? Where are we going? What's happening? Why did you just take the puzzle away that I was working on? Why am I now sitting at the table after recess? I got the puzzle back, but it's undone. Like now I have to start at the beginning, and I don't understand why, because I was halfway done. It's all of those issues that kids deal with that raise stress, and kids cannot. It is not possible to be actively engaged when you're operating at high levels of stress.
Sure.
You can't be engaged, and you're not available for learning. So if this lack of cognitive closure is such a stress-inducing, I don't know what the right word is, but it's a stress inducer. If that's true, then many of the students that we serve aren't just experiencing stress from the minute-to-minute sort of moment-to-moment activities of school, but they're experiencing this massive, broader stress from a lack of resolution.
So then how do we rectify that? How do we help our students gain cognitive closure? How do we help them see the resolution, or do we? Can we?
I think we do, but I think it's important that that much like gen ed kids, when they do an activity and they are successful at that activity, they're finished with it. It would be absurd if you walked into a third grade classroom and you handed out a worksheet that the kids had just done a few days earlier. They would say, "We just did this. We don't have to do this again." And the teacher would say, "Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. I pulled out the wrong one. I meant to give you this." But the students that we serve, many of them do these activities over and over and over. And I'll go into a classroom and a student will be upset, and the teacher will say, "Well, it's the strangest thing because he's been doing this activity all this year and he's been doing fine, and last year he totally was great at it. So I don't understand why he doesn't want to show you how well he can do this."
Because he's been doing it for
because
2 years.
he's been doing it for 2 years. It's like enough. And so I think one of the things we can do is always know how to build on whatever it is we're doing with children, and kind of moving up to that next step and having higher expectations. The trouble is, I think these are challenging kids who challenge even the most experienced, knowledgeable educators. I've been a teacher of the deafblind for 39 years, and there are some times when I go into schools and I look at kids and I go back to my car to eat my lunch before I have to go in, and I think in 20 minutes I'm supposed to be brilliant, and even I'm completely flummoxed. Is that the word? You know, I think they're all expecting me to come in and say all these brilliant things, and I'm just as puzzled as they are. So we're talking about kids who are really challenging. And sometimes it is hard to know, okay, if they're here and they've mastered that, then what do I do to move up?
How is that cumulative, building on our previous skills?
Right.
And as you had said, that high expectations, if they have mastered here, what's the next step for them to master? How do I continue to raise that expectation?
Exactly.
And thinking of that cumulative nature,
Exactly.
building on previous skills to build more skills and to
Right.
further their knowledge and their education.
And if your listeners are in Pennsylvania, you have PaTTAN. I mean, you have this, to those of us who are outside of Pennsylvania, we look at what you have, that PaTTAN model, and to us, that's sort of the shining city on the hill. That's what we aspire to. We aspire to have some sort of statewide system that's there, that's really responsive to local needs, because you've got 3 offices, so you've got people spread around the state, and that's a really remarkable model that teachers can turn to say, okay, I hate to admit it because I thought I knew what I was doing, but I'm just kind of stuck.
Well,
and I don't
on
know
behalf
how
of
to
the entire
move
PaTTAN
forward.
system, I will take that compliment. And
Yeah.
I agree. I think we are unique in Pennsylvania that we do have these 3 PaTTAN offices across the state, so that local teachers, practitioners, families can reach out to us to get that support. So I appreciate that you letting us know how other states view that, because I think that's positive and worthwhile information for those in Pennsylvania to hear, that it is a model that folks look up to. I want to continue on this conversation regarding how we help to relieve this stress of this cognitive closure, but not just the cognitive closure of finding a resolution, particularly for those students who are deafblind. But when we think about students who have disabilities or who have complex needs in our classrooms, what is something that a teacher can do tomorrow? Turn this around into the classroom tomorrow and say, this is something that I can alter, adjust, refine, enhance in my classroom practice to think about students' happiness, to think about relieving stress factors, to think about minimizing some of these environments or instances that cause kiddos stress. What are some things we could do right away and turn around?
Well, there are a lot of things. I mean, I could say a lot. Some of the basic things, like making sure that the child has an accessible, clearly articulated schedule and calendar system, so that there's no ambiguity about what's coming up.
Okay.
I could say that that words for human emotions should be built into the child's communication system, so that the child is not just receiving commands all day. That that the child that the program is modeling how we talk about emotions. But but I'm going to choose one that's not talked about very often, and that's that we now know that outcomes improve when teachers and school staff are honest about their own emotions. That we expect a lot from students. We expect them to tell us what's happening, to share, how are you feeling, what's wrong. We ask these things of students all the time, but we think that it's professional to not let kids know how we're feeling or what our emotional state is. And we now know that there are improved outcomes when teachers freely express emotions, good or bad, let kids know how it is they're feeling, crying in front of students when something sad has happened. That if we want to be successful in teaching social emotional skills, we have to be socially emotional ourselves and not be so stoic and flat.
So allowing people to see that we have an emotional side and we're modeling what our students may feel. And as you had said, if we want our students to be socially emotional and manage their emotions and learn how to cope and think about and reflect on and talk about, we ourselves have to be modeling that for our students.
Right, and I'm not saying become a raving lunatic in front of your students, but what I'm saying is if you're halfway through your school day and you get a call that the field trip tomorrow is canceled, and the kids were really looking forward to it, it's okay to say, you know what, I'm really disappointed too, because and here's why this has made me so sad. You know, it's not just about the kids, it's also about me. I was looking forward to it. I needed a break from the classroom routine. I was looking forward to having a chance to interact with people in this place where we were going. I was looking forward to learning new things. And so this impacts me as well, and I'm personally really, really sad and disappointed. I'm just using that as an example, but those are the kind of things that we don't always do as teachers, and we can and probably should.
And as you said, the outcomes are showing that when a teacher does portray that side of them, that there's stronger outcomes for our students.
For all kids, that's right.
Which I think is where we need to remember what the outcome is and what's our goal, and how when we see others reaching that goal, we have to look at how are they doing that, and if that's one of the pieces that has a positive outcome, then that's something we need to be considering and reflecting on. So I think that's good insight. Thank you so much for that. I want to ask you this, and we ask this of everyone who stops by PaTTAnpod. We want to inspire people who are listening to grow educationally. What advice might you offer to the field who want to think about that path?
What I would say is be a lifelong learner. It sounds trite, but there are many people in the field of special education who do not attend conferences or workshops.
That's true.
Who don't belong to any professional organizations, who don't read research that comes out, current research, and if you can't, if your circumstances prevent you from doing those things, okay. But I was recently at a conference, and it was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday conference, and there were a bunch of teachers there from one school on Friday, and none of them came on Saturday. And I asked the principal what happened, and the principal said, well, they're not being paid. They only go to conferences on days that they're being paid. We had closed the school so that all the teachers could come. And I found that to be kind of sad, that there's not a higher commitment to lifelong learning. And that's why whenever I speak at conferences or events, I always ask people to pat themselves on the back, or in some way congratulate themselves for being lifelong learners, because ultimately it will make them happier, it will make them better, they'll be more engaged, and they'll be more recognized among their peers and colleagues. So it's a win-win, but it is beyond the norm and beyond the day. I mean, it is that Saturday workshop or traveling somewhere for a weekend conference. But the benefits are so enormous.
And I think, we hear that term lifelong learner, but as you said, it's not just saying it. It's being engaged with that term. It's really taking that to heart and saying, this is something I'm dedicated to. I'm dedicated to spending a little bit of time reading this article. I'm dedicated to having a conversation amongst colleagues about a professional topic.
Right.
And I think all of those things lead to being a lifelong learner, because it can happen in a wide variety of ways.
And coming back on a Monday morning and saying, wow, you guys, I went to this conference this weekend, and I got so many great ideas, and these are some of the things that I heard, and maybe we could try this, and it makes our work more exciting to us.
Sure.
It's more it gets us out of the ruts that we're in, and that's a good thing.
It is a good thing, and our students see that. Our
Yes.
students see our excitement and our passion, our drive come through when we
Right.
have that excitement too,
Right.
which is what we want. We want to continue to model those pieces for them. Well, Belote, thank you so much for coming and sitting with us on PaTTAnpod. I'm so appreciative that you did that. We're glad that you were able to stop by today after your keynote. So thanks so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you to all of you in the field. You inspire educational growth in your students every day. A special thank you to John Ragsdale for producing this podcast. We'll see you next time on PaTTAnpod.